Hello, Tarkans, well, I suck at intros. It's been a stupidly long time. I'm still alive. My computer is not. If you hear that sound in the background, that is buzzing. That is actually my PSU fan dying. It's not been great, but I'm back to do something. I should be doing a different video, but that will come after this because this is something I've actually wanted to do for much longer, and I think it's more important that I get this information out. This is more useful information than everybody else in the SPEEDRUN it really is. So with that said, today is going to basically be a full comprehensive, or mostly comprehensive hopefully. It's obviously going to be aimed at more advanced players, right, as usual with my content, but I'll try and walk through everything, so it should be catchable. It'll be a rundown of how to do a speed run. It will be all the exploits, glitches, tricks. You can use a lot of these tricks in a vanilla campaign, actually. A lot of them are actually very applicable there, but some of them are very niche. That's what the interesting thing I love about speedrunning this game is because a lot of little niche things that don't normally get used in a campaign suddenly become the entire world here. There are designs of ships, whatnot. I mean, you look at my screen. This would never fucking fly in a normal campaign, but this is somehow actually a very viable for second-gen speedrunning ship. I'll explain what I mean by generations later. That's just the way I classify types of runs. But anyways, let's get on with it. So, rule number 1 of speedrunning, which is... There are no rules. Okay, fine. Rule 2, very big one, is that in general, you want to avoid tactical combat. What I mean by tactical combat is going in, gunfighting, face-to-face, all that shit. You know, if I tested a ship, if I hit test and load it up, fight, everything that happens from there to me getting back to the screen will be what you would call tactical combat. Of course, you're going to miss somebody's technically tactical, but we don't talk about that. You want to avoid it because it takes too much time to go through that cycle. It just does. You can't go in, shoot a bunch of stuff out. Like, even just a load in, load out, it takes too much time. You want to be relying primarily for do your work. You want to rely on missiles and aircraft to do it. You will even notice that even in my runs, a large amount of the time is still missiles and aircraft. They still take a long amount of time. But the thing is, you can still move their flight quickly with the holding shift key, and you can still, you know, everything else can actually be done pretty quickly, relatively speaking. I still think in the late game speedrun, they take up about 20-30% of the time max. It is, to some more degree, but the other interesting about speedrun is that it is actually really thinking real hard and fast in your feet. It's one of the interesting things is, despite how broken this game's combat is and how much you're exploiting it, it's still a rush. It's still hard to do on the run. It's going to be something you need practice. I'll say this: when I did the second speedrun, it actually took me 3, I think, tries to actually win Khiva. To be fair, I think one of them is really screwed over, and I had to use a lot of planes early, and I think it might have actually just been 2. I'm not even sure. I don't remember. It's been so long, and there was a lot of runs involved in that. And also because, you know, there's a lot of resetting involved before that. Anyways, point is, you want to be using missiles, planes, and one other trick. I'm going to go way down the line, an exploit possibly for the 3rd gen concept, but that's something else. You'll learn that as we go. So, in essence, the time breakdown of what the speedrun is, we've got to understand this first, is that you're going to be spending about 3 minutes-ish in In that minute, you're going to be taking Sevastopol and assembling it for fuel money. You're going to then be, of course, fueling up and also throwing Sevastopol into the desert to get it safe. And then you're immediately going to be taking off in some direction. I'll go into later a lot of the more details about how much fuel you need to grab, how to disassemble Sevastopol efficiently. For now, what you need to know is that's going to take about 3 minutes. Next, what's going to happen is the amount of time it takes for you to cross the side of the map. You can theoretically save some time by going through the center of the map, but you're going to you don't want to bump into a moving strike group or a moving, or just as badly, a moving, a moving trade group. A moving trade group will spot you, and then everything all around you is going to get thrown at you. The book's going to get thrown at you. You don't want to be spotted, so generally you don't actually want to go up the center of the map like this. You can get away with it, and you can theoretically save, I'd say, 20 seconds doing it, but I wouldn't recommend it, because the big thing is, you're going to be doing a lot of runs to actually get a good run, right? This is just the usual in speedrunning, right? Most times. You're going to actually just want to go around the side of the map. It'll cost you 20 seconds, but it'll save you a lot of headaches, basically. And what you're going to do is avoid these red circles in case something's landed and has IRST or something like that. You don't want to actually fly so close that you trip the IRST. You're going to want to, like, you've seen how I do it. I kind of like mark it here. I check it again while I'm waiting for the ship to go. I'm not worried too much about that little bit of difference. So you're going to go around the side of the map, and you're going to go as far north as you can, and then you're going to stop at a fuel You're going to stop at a fuel depot of some kind. You're going to airstrike it. You can probably theoretically nuke it. Actually, yeah, in theory you can nuke it. That's actually a complete possibility you can do. It'll cost a lot more money, but you can definitely nuke the fuel storage instead of using aircraft. That probably would be able to be good if you're running in 116 to offset the difference in plane survivability from 115 to 116. But you're still going to need planes for later. You're going to be grabbing a bunch of fuel to complete the journey, and you're going to be going back around the side of the map, passing it, and then you're going to get close. You're going to go to Khiva. While you're making the vertical trip, you're going to set it like a very long line, and then you're going to start plotting out Khiva while you're on the flight. You're going to hit yourself. You're going to hit well, hit yourselves. You're going to hit this. You're going to figure out what's in 2,000 kilometers. What do I need to worry about? This will be relevant if you're using any of the more advanced speedruns, a second and a half, third gen speedrun. A first gen actually doesn't have to worry about this, but a first gen's decidedly pretty much lost in this game. That's why it's first gen, right? Now, what you're going to do is you're going to come around the side, you're going to slip into Khiva. You're also going to have a 1,500 kilometer circle. Make sure you do that as well while you're on the flight. You have to keep that in mind. And you'll have to do the Varyag Skip while you're in between these. I'll go over that later. And you're going to slide in, and you are going to, airstrike Khiva. You can't nuke it. You can only nuke it once, so obviously you can't do it. Since you've done a Varyag Skip, there won't be a very strong garrison, so your plane should just mop, and you'll take Khiva. That, all in all, will only take you about 7 minutes of the run. It will actually take a relative minority of the run. It's actually always taken about that long. You can theoretically probably cut this down if you can somehow manage to squeeze more money. One, you can squeeze more money out of your thing initially, which means you can use quicker strips of the Sevastopol, because I'll get into that later. You'll understand why, but basically the less time spent stripping Sevastopol, the less money you get. But it's like an exponential downwards curve. Now, like the longer you spend stripping Sevastopol, the less money you get per second, you could say. So having more money around in your fleet will enable this. A second way you can save time on the speedrun, sorry for the cut, is that you will instead try and build your ships to go faster. This will actually have a surprisingly low effective amount of time spent. You gotta remember, you're zoomed out holding shift. A very minority of this amount of time is actually spent moving, but it's also not an insignificant minority, right? Like, it's like one of those minorities that's like 20-30%. It's not an insignificant one, but, I think you can probably cut it down to 5 minutes. I think if you speed everything up and then you nuke anything, because you gotta remember, a nuked settlement still lets you refuel. I think you actually lose the fuel. It does lose its status as a fuel depot, which means you'll need more money just to refuel at it as well, though. So that's another consideration, right? On top of that, actually, there's nothing else on top of that. Now, when you reach Khiva and you take it, that's when the end game starts, right? That's how it is. You're going to have to spend a second or two in all that dialogue screen. You're going to be mashing the hell out of space one, spam it, and it's going to just take 30 seconds away from you with these nerds up here, right? Giving you your shit. Theoretically, you can actually possibly throw away the stars while you're on the move, and it might actually save you time. I've never done that, though. I mean, because realistically, it's just these two nerds. I mean, you could. You realistically could. It might be worth it. But also, you're throwing away free time. It's an option. That's all I'm going to say. Obviously not an option if you're using save scum moves, which are more common to first gen run. With that said, you'll then enter the end game. The end game will comprise a relatively broad amount of time. A first generation speedrun, Wilt speedrun, that took a pretty significant amount of time. It took like half an hour roughly. It took a while. I'll go into different generations again later, and I'll explain that why. But if you're using a second and a half, third gen, it should take a relatively more minor amount of time, but it'll still be the majority of the run will be spent in post Khiva, unless something happens in a 3rd gen run that I don't know about. Now, with that said, I think I've comprised what the time is. You can start thinking about, you know, ways to cut time, whatever, what to expect, I guess. So, to explain the generations of speedrun, I'll basically give you the quick history, Cliff Notes history of Highfleet speedrunning. Way back, we had the Khiva percent speedrun, which is not actually a generation listed. That's just a funny speedrun, which is a 1.14 bug that basically meant a ship made in 1.13 could just zip across the map with almost no fuel use, whatever. And, you know, he just ran to Khiva. That was just a funny move. That was a pretty cool speedrun. That deserves a note. It's older. First generation speedrunning is Wilt's speedrun, which predates mine, and ironically is a friend I knew from outside of Highfleet, and we just started talking to each other one day. He said, oh, hey, I play Highfleet too, and it's like, then he showed me the speedrun, and I got into this shit. So a lot of this comes from the first gen, and that's not my shit. I've definitely done my fair share of improvements, but I would like to really give my credit to him. He still pioneered this, and that's, you know, I'm not trying to lord over him by saying it's a first gen. I'm just trying to use that as a good example. The first, second, third, whatever gen is kind of layered like the jet aircraft generations. That's kind of the idea behind them. And it's a good way of explaining. It's a good way of making a 3rd gen, which is the idea of a 6th gen, basically. Anyways, so a first generation speedrun is using one or two, or, you know, very large ships, a very large amount of R3Ns, A100Ns, going around the side of the map, stopping once for fuel, going to Khiva, doing the Varyag Skip, sitting in Khiva. Basically, the generations mostly differ in their compositions, by the way, and how they deal with post-Khiva. The way they deal with pre-Khiva to this day is mostly the same until Gen 3. Again, remember, I should probably emphasize, when I say Gen 3 is not actually a hard type of run that's ever been done. Gen 3 is referring to a type of run that's never been done before. Gen 3 is whatever is going to break the next record, basically. And I have a lot of theories, and a lot of ways I very much bet it will happen. I'm very confident that a sub 20 is possible. And that's why, and I think that's where Gen 3 will be drawn, or any significant change. Anyways, Gen 1 would then get to Khiva, and what Gen 1 would do is it would sit in Khiva and just wait. And the idea was it carried so many A100Ns and R3Ns that you would basically put up just a strategic brick wall at Khiva, and when you got missiled nuclearly, you would then counter battery in large force with R3Ns at whatever city was obviously originating nukes, right? If you saw a missile coming from this direction, an R3N, you countered the nuke and then you start sending your own at cert. You know that's where that it is, right? Because generally speaking, there aren't any in a strict line from each other, so it's not actually possible really for two different. And realistically, you can always just fire a nuke at one or the other and see if it lands on a ship or not with a Typhoon present, because you can see, right? Remember, you're doing this early game, so you actually have daylight to your advantage. It's not Eternal Night yet, which is kind of goofy. But the problem with that is the Typhoon AI is surprisingly really fucking slow. Like, plain out. And not so much the Typhoon AI, but the strategic group AI. Because remember, strike groups start spawning it despawns every strike group before Khiva, and then it spawns a bunch of strike groups. Those strike groups take fucking forever to actually try and assault Khiva themselves. They'll run at Khiva, and they'll try and assault it, but it takes so long for them to make that step from being out here to going here. It's surprisingly. You can be holding shift for multiple minutes before they do anything moving from here to here. And the problem is, none of your sensors can see that far. You don't know they're there, and strike groups don't actually fire their missiles from that far away like the Typhoon groups do. So the problem mainly that I found was you can't sit there in Khiva because you lose so many minutes to just waiting for the strike groups. So that was when the second generation speedrun was born. Second generation was my first run. Now, of course, keep in mind, my first run was technically legal. It used a edited flagship, so obviously cheating a bit, right? Now, that was before I took it too seriously. Also, at a time when I thought there was a bug that allowed you to change the Sebastopol, and edit it, which basically meant that editing a flagship didn't really differ to just rebuilding the Sevastopol, which is just a lot more difficult. But that turns out that bug was a hoax. It didn't exist. I was wrong. I didn't know. That's why I made the second half gen. We'll talk about that later. Second gen is the biggest leap. Second gen is the concept of sending one large main ship to hold Khiva, and this ship should mostly be doing all the tasks of the original Gen 1s. It should be holding Khiva, it should be able to get into a standoff face-to-face fight with Typhoons, and it should also be an R3 launching platform. It should still be the main offensive tool of the fleet, it should still be the main defensive tool of the fleet. However, it will then be augmented by a small, an attachment of multiple scouts. I call these Fireflies, and I'll keep calling them Fireflies from now, but that's the name of the ship design, so to be note, it's not, whatever. Anyways, a Firefly, or Scout, what you would then do is you'd fly, there'd be very light, small ships, and the basic premise was they would have an ELINT on them, and what you would do is you would just land them near these in-range cities, and they would sit just outside of range of visual, because remember, you're completely invisible to fucking everything when you're ground landed. I'm not even joking. Everything. The AI will not see you unless they fly over you. So as long as you're more than 100 kilometers out, you'll obviously not want to be 100 kilometers out for a reason I'll get into later, but you can sit basically there, and when the ELINT signature shows up, you'll know they're coming, and then it'll stop moving, and you know they've landed, and then you will use your main ship to launch R3Ns at the city that has the landed. This doesn't change Typhoons too much, but it changes strike groups drastically, because you're not waiting that multiple minutes for the strike groups to run from their cities to Khiva. You are now decidedly taking a lot of initiative, because for some reason it takes them like 20 hours, 30 hours to do that move to here or here, but it takes them 500 hours to go from there to Khiva. Don't know why, but it's a massive initiative boost. So with that, you gotta remember with the Gen 2, I did use these as missile launch platforms. That was kind of a mistake in hindsight. I would personally recommend you just use R3Ns from the main group, because they will land somewhere. But I was trying to ferry A100s at them for some reason. That was another time inefficiency in second gen. It saves you a lot of time. It gives you a lot of purchase on ground. It's very much an improvement generally. From there, you got to remember as well, you only have so many. So imagine if you have 4 Fireflies, but you need to cover you have to cover all of these cities, right? So you're covering this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, that one, that one. You should be good on the other ones, right? So now you have this problem. So imagine if I brought 7 Fireflies. I actually have, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 cities to cover. Let's imagine I have 6 Fireflies. I can probably do this in 5 or 4, but what you actually want to do is you just want to move the Firefly somewhere in between, such that you can, so like that's a Firefly. You can probably put a Firefly like here. You want to keep them off these routes just in case a random spawn trade group flies over you, because the AI will actually still have trade groups post Khiva, and if they fly over it, they will see it, and then the strike groups will start launching missiles at it. You don't want that happening, so you're going to want to stay off trade routes, even if they're inside of your perimeter. What you're going to basically be doing is you're just going to kind of set them in a place where they can see multiple cities. That's really all you're doing. Like, I've already used, what, 3 Fireflies, and there's like 1 city that's not really solidly, sorry, 2 cities you're not solidly seeing, right? So, like this, and done. These 4 Fireflies now see all these cities. It can get actually worse. You need like 5 or 6 in my opinion to be really happy, but you can actually get away with like 4. Because there could be some more out here. This is actually pretty good for me, how compact this is for this explanation. So that's second gen explain. Second and a half gen. Now the reason I call it and a half is because it's a failed generation, but I'm going to explain it because it's the current world record, and I want to explain why the current world record runs inefficient. I'm not going to actually run the 3rd gen run. I'm really, well, at least not if nobody does it in a month. I'm going to actually leave it to somebody else to take the record. I want somebody else to take the record. And I'm going to explain to you how you can do it. Because I'm very confident to do it. And that's how confident I am in my theory, that somebody else can actually catch up to me very easily if they just know all this information. It's not hard to speedrun. It's really not. I mean, okay, yeah, I'm a 600-hour player saying that, and there's like probably like 5 people who've played 600 hours of this game. But honestly speaking, it's not as hard as you think to speedrun. Anyways, so a 2.5 gen speedrun, the current speedrun, was the concept of, okay, so the Firefly concept was using D30 engines, which if you don't know, D30s are the small static engines. They're not actually as fuel efficient as RD51s. Can I single run around the side, skip one of the fuel storages, and get straight to Khiva? And with that, no, and so on. And then I think I also had, at the same time, it was like a multi-concept. The other concept was, can I get a... can I actually have these strike packages? Because the big problem with the Fireflies was they only launched 1-800 and never killed anything, right? Can I actually carry 4 KH-15s and exploit plane guidance to try, like, not the guidance trick. I've shown you everybody the guidance tricks, to be fair. I'm not referring to the plane guidance as in putting a plane in front of a missile and having it follow its tail. That's very good, but it's not good in speedrunning because there's too much micro. You want to cut out micromanagement when we can. What I was instead referring to was, can I orbit a plane next to the group and exploit the vision of the plane, technically counting as a fire control radar? Yeah, I don't know. Reasons. Well, technically it counts as visual range, but fire control radars give you visual range. Don't know why. We don't talk about that. Anyways, could I exploit that by hovering a plane and just holding shift and spam right-clicking to keep the plane, constantly turning back to its original point so it stays next to it? Can I use that to quickly get KH-15s on them before they even reach these cities? Can I actually beat them to these cities with that? Turns out that if you're spamming right-click while zoomed out, even on the early ones, while holding shift, the game's still moving so fast that the planes will still leave visual range within the time of one of those clicks, and you will lose your guidance. It happened. It was pretty fucking funny and sad when it happened. On top of that, R3Ns just strike faster, and realistically, letting them get to the city, it's just 2 seconds of holding shift. It's not actually a better idea, it turns out. But hey, I was just trying to spitball, right? The main goal also of the 2.5 gen was I was also trying to make the entire thing more monetarily efficient, because I brought in the Sevastopol for 2.5 gen. That's the first truly, I think, legitimate speedrun. I'm not going to have a big fucking argument over adding money, okay? I earned the balance. I'm not having an argument because you technically actually cannot reset your balance to 0 without uninstalling the game. I'm not even joking. There's no way. You have to edit the files. So I'm not having this argument. Okay, cool. All right, anyways. I mean, you can have the argument with me. Come on, it's a single player game. I'm just saying, please stop giving me this comment. Anyways, actually, like 2 people gave me this comment. You know what? You guys are chill, okay? Like, I get it. All right? I'm just saying why viewpoint. Anyways, regardless, 2.5 gen was mostly a failure on multiple fronts. Luckily, it had 1 or 2 Fireflies, and the deal worked out. Also, one of the other concepts was trying to make a large ship in RD51 package size that was radar stealthed enough that it could walk up there. Also, one of the other problems I was trying to tackle was trying to fit, I think one of the main reasons RD51s were picked was because fuel efficiency, because one of the problems, right, is when you get to Khiva, you need to immediately spread out, which means you're trying to, like, ration out so much fuel. You need to make it in one run out this distance. That is a 4,000 kilometer range, possibly, you might need for these ships, right? I'd say 4,000 kilometers is what you need on those ships, at least. And so the fuel efficiency actually wasn't even so much a consideration for getting here, it is more so a consideration for carrying 4 KH-15s. It was starting to become so much weight on its own. That's 1,000 tons, by the way, right? They're 250 tons each. That's 1,000 tons. The weight consideration at that point was such that RD51s started creating the critical low mass where RD51s could be used. For record, there's a common misconception that RD51s are only more effective after a certain weight. That is almost completely incorrect. Almost, okay? RD51s are more effective at low speeds, not high weights, low speeds. Theoretically, if you want to make something go more than 480, there's 115 numbers. I don't know what the numbers are right now, 116. 115 480. It'd probably be like 380 and 116. I don't know. To go past that speed, it will always be more efficient to use D30S. Always. Anyways, at that point, there is technically a low-end speed where an RD51 on its own has so much thrust it pushes you over that speed. So roughly 3,000-ish, 2,000-ish tons, I think, is the minimum. You can always mix a D30 and an RD51, and you get actually a lower min-mass, but, you know, it's weird. Anyways, nerding aside, that's not really speedrun relevant, but it might be useful for anybody building ships, so I'm going to say it anyways. There were some, you know, positives to start Gen 2.5. Gen 2.5 taught us that, okay, Fireflies were actually a really good idea. Maybe just carrying ordnance on something that anything else really just was a bad idea. At this point, I'd personally say for Gen 3, just try and stick to R3Ns on a main platform, or Black Hole Glitch. Black Hole Glitch is a complete, honestly, throw curveball to everything I'm saying here, but it's going to be one of the big things about Gen 3 that might turn out great, might turn out awful. Anyways, right. Advantages of Gen 2.5. There was one addition to Gen 2.5 that was good. Gen 2.5, I added a idea where instead of the ships being their own tankers, right, in their entirety, the ships should instead have accompanied designated fuel ships. And what would happen is, well, here's the thing. In Highfleet, fuel doesn't actually have mass. Fuel tanks have mass, but fuel doesn't have mass. Which means that after the fuel is expended, the fuel tank's still dragging you down, which is very difficult for long range. And so we take a little bit of a book out of modern chemistry. Well, we can't, or not chemistry, modern rocketry. You can't just, in this case, just drop a part of a ship, right? You can't just drop a ship off to make staged rockets, sure. But we can drop a ship off of the group. So what we have is we use designated fuel ships, and they are just a cockpit, some RD51s, and just a bunch of fuel. And you figure out how much fuel, like if this one carries 45% of your fuel, when the fuel stock of a fleet, if there's only one of them, let's say, reaches 55%, you then take that, you just select that ship, you hit the fuel nozzle, you hit it to 0, you detach it, it'll basically crash into the desert and land right there. And with no fuel, all of its fuel will be transferred to the rest of the group. They will continue on, and no fuel will be burned to carry those fuel tanks anymore. So like a staged rocket, like a Saturn V, anything like that, like Saturn V, it drops the first stage, no more engine weight, it goes to the next one. We're not wasting our weight on the fuel tanks anymore. You do that, of course, more than one time, and you can get a pretty significant range. It turned out in Gen 2.5, it was just too difficult to get straight to Khiva, but that was still a tactic used. You can use it to either increase your range and therefore reduce the amount of fuel needed, or reduce the amount of cost needed. It's your call. Be very aware of that. That's a very powerful technique used for this. And leaving Gen 2.5, we have Gen 3. Now, Gen 3, if you know modern fighter terminology, you know, we have Gen, let's say it's the one where it's Gen 1 to 5, and I have Gen 6, and Gen 6 doesn't exist. And I think there's another one where Gen 8 doesn't exist. Point is, Gen 6 is this kooky thing where we don't know what it is, right? It's like the Dark Star from fucking Top Gun or whatever, right? The space fighters, whatever. The idea is, it's on the horizon, it's going to happen one day, we don't know what it is, but it's going to be a big revolution in technology. Now that's what Gen 3 speedrunning basically is going to be. This probably it might be a Gen 4 and 5 after, there might literally never be a Gen 3 if nobody ever does the run and I just quit, but you know. The point is, Gen 3 is the concept of using techniques, not using a run, and it's basically the future run, right? It's the next speedrun. Okay, so Gen 3 gets a bit kookier, because basically it introduces Black Hole Glitch as on top of everything I've basically explained. So as it currently stands, Gen 3, think like I could probably assume is that you can probably get a basic Gen 3 if you just go back to what Gen 2 originally was, and then you omit the A100N from the Firefly, turn it into a pure Elent boat, go out to all of these, and then you find somewhere else to cut a little bit of time at, you just generally refine Gen 2.5, or sorry, Gen 2. So I will explain Gen 3, Black Hole Strat later. But there's also possibilities of using. You could spawn camp the Typhoon spawns. I've actually not done. I've not really figured out Typhoon spawn logic. I've never really gone there. I've never really gone with it. I don't really have much to go with you for you there. So like, if you innovate spawn camping the Typhoons, it's all you. All right. I had nothing to do with that. All I'm saying is I pointed in that direction. That's it. That's all I'll say. Even if I even did, that's completely yours to innovate with. All I will say is, like, Bethel is like an obvious spawn point. Same with Gilead, maybe Issa or Kiriath, right? Those are the opposite spawns. I have previously tried to just sit on them and see if they'll fly in right on top of me. That didn't work. They spawned in very weird places. So I do believe that landing in the initial cities does change their spawns. Like, the game's a little smart, and it's possible that if you're just within a range of the cities, that they don't spawn. Similar to a reverse version of actually not even a reverse version, just similar to Varyag spawning mechanics. Keep that in mind, but that's like the little bit of tidbits I can give you to go there. So yeah, Gen 3 run's going to basically be refined design, faster strategic ships, spawn camping Typhoons, Black Hole Strat, stuff like that. Big leaps, basically. It might just be considered an alternative Gen 2 run if all you do is refine the designs of the ships as it stands. So I don't really know how to call it, really, honestly. This is really just an in-my-head arbitrary thing, idea, kind of concept to make it sound cool. Realistically speaking, you just beat me at speedrunning. That's all you did, okay? Like, well, I'm not... Okay, that sounded wrong, but you know what I mean. Like, realistically speaking... you don't have to go with my stupid generational thing. It's not the most logical thing ever, but I just think it's cool. Anyways, continuing on to the actual exploits. Let's go! We did it! We got past the bullshit of me rambling about the history of this stuff and all the ideas going through my head. I hope it adds context. That's all I'm saying. Alright, so anybody who skipped the timestamp, here we go. We're doing exploit. Right. So, first exploit. So, the Varyag. You may have noticed many times I've said the Varyag Skip. Well, wouldn't it, the Varyag spawns at, Khiva, the beginning of the game. You gotta deal with it. You either visit the, governor out in the middle of the desert and do whatever there. And, by the way, if you do that and you retreat from the fight, the Varyag immediately spawns at Khiva in whatever state it was. Keep that in mind. Some people reported it spawns out there in the desert. I've never seen that, so I don't know. Why don't you just recruit the guy? Free money. Anyways, outside that, otherwise you have to deal with it at Khiva. You gotta fight it. And nuking Khiva is not an option, so you have to either bait it out and nuke the hell out of it, which is going to take like 5 nukes, and that actually takes like a minute and a half just to do all those animations, I think. Or it does, by the way, the Varyag, if you bait it out of Khiva and go into Khiva, it does survive. It is not deleted like the strike groups. It does survive, just like attack group would. Now, however, it's very convenient is that the code for spawning the Varyag does not run when the game starts. It doesn't. It doesn't even start when that little icon pops up. No. The Varyag spawns in by being added to the Khiva strike, Khiva defense. It's spawned at Khiva with the garrison when you reach about 1,500 kilometers away. As everybody here knows, some things go a bit further than 1,500 kilometers. Now, R3Ns are obviously not on the table for Khiva, and standard R3s are kind of just going to take forever. But you can use jets. I mean, you could actually use standard R3s. And in fact, they might even be just as fast or faster, but I wouldn't put money on it. Anyways, you can, from a range of 2,000 kilometers, launch a T7's in, destroy Khiva's garrison. And the thing is, when you reach 1,500 kilometers, the check to spawn the Varyag will say, okay, spawn at the Khiva garrison. The game will go, what Khiva garrison? Then the code will go, uh-oh, and then it doesn't spawn the Varyag. I'm sure you're not. That's literally what happens. You just fly in 2,000 kilometers, launch your planes, airstrike Khiva, destroy the Khiva garrison, and then cross the 1,500 kilometer border. I would actually do it from the edge, because I don't actually know if it's 1,500, if it's 1,600. I don't know what it is, but I think it's about 1,500. That's my good guess, educated guess. Yeah, that's honestly self-explanatory. Skip the Varyag. That is useful in literally every campaign, except for a no aircraft campaign, I guess. A no aircraft, no R3s campaign, I guess. Like, that's the only time it might not be useful. Like, or, you know, funny shit. So, yeah, use that information as you wish. Nice game design right there. I don't use that in vanilla play. My playthrough is just because that kind of feels like a bit cheaty and skipping fun. But hey, go nuts, right? Yeah. That's important for speedrunning, because that's just literally removing a big asset blocking you from Khiva. That's just all it is. So, next up, less of an exploit and just really a schooling on AI logic. But, I mean, the line between exploit and game design is pretty blurred when you can just airstrike something to cause something else not to spawn. And like no clipping through walls, no flying the planes backwards, just literally airstrike one thing that you normally would. By the way, this is why a lot of people think the Varyag doesn't exist, or random spawns, is because they'll airstrike Khiva. Anyways, is Typhoon logic. So Typhoons will fly to a city within 2,000 kilometers-ish of you. They might actually go closer, but within 2,000 kilometers, and then they'll start launching R3Ns. What's not told to you is that the AI logic is very flawed for the Typhoon. The Typhoon will land in the city, and then it will launch a single R3N at Khiva. You can probably see where this is going. I have tested this. It will take up to 10 hours for the Typhoon to start salvoing the rest of the R3Ns. I mean, I have seen them immediately start salvoing off the R3Ns, but for some reason, every time I've gone to speedrun, I've not seen anything different. I don't know if the fact that I've played this game for 40 hours has more than like the 40, 50 hours an average player has. I've played for 600 or something. I wouldn't be surprised if it's more if I look at it. I don't know if me playing the game so long has caused like some number that ticks up in the background for an RNG counter to go nuts and not cause them to fire, or if my game is broken. But I'm pretty damn sure that this is just normal logic at this point. Yeah, they will take up to about 10 hours to fire the rest of the missiles. In this time, you can retaliate. Now, obviously, having R3Ns of your own, this is a pretty simple process. Now, my general rule of thumb, however, is to actually do what I call headshot, or not so much headshot, but incapacitate, stun. You can call it a lot of things. But there's an interesting complete and utter design flaw with the Typhoon, which, I mean, to be fair, it's for sure by a lot of cheesy things. I'm going to call it a flaw, it's just the nature of its design, but the Typhoon's missile tubes are all on the top of the ship, unarmored and unprotected. Unfortunately, they're in a giant wide flat line, and nothing really stops a missile that goes over them, especially an R3 from a high angle above, from detonating above them. And from a long distance, the burning damage from a nuke, even if it doesn't really do much damage, the burning damage will still singe those tubes and cause the R3Ns to basically be incapacitated on the Typhoon. I forget if it's because the logic is you can't fire a damaged missile, or if the logic is really that because they stick out of the hitbox, they take damage for the hull and they just get destroyed. Most of the time, the missile actually lands much closer. It literally cuts the top half of the missile tube off and completely destroys the missiles. It'll depend. In very rare exceptions, you just instantly kill the Typhoon. Keep in mind that you actually have to destroy all the ships that comprise the Typhoon's group to win the game. You have to destroy all of them. So you do need to actually basically cleanse the city they're in. But basically what this means is you don't actually need as much as you think to counter a Typhoon. You just need to be in Khiva. You just need A100s and R3s available. You fire one A100N at that R3N. You incapacitate it, and you immediately, like as it's firing, you queue up and send an R3N back. If you feel more now that's the speedrunning style of it. If you want to be more careful about it, you can just fire the A100N, wait a minute or two, or like not a minute or two. I mean like in game, like you literally just time this, right? Because the AI in hard mode will actually fire missiles faster than 50 minutes. By the way, AI cheats, just a thing. Get used to it. I'm not joking. Like AI cheats in a lot of things in this game, but that's fine because the AI is stupid, so who cares? But wait until like 20 minutes has passed. And if you don't see another missile, obviously they're not salvoing missiles right now. Send the R3N
don't send 2 R3Ns until you've headshot them, right? Don't get yourself, because remember, there's a 15-minute delay after firing a missile before you can fire another one, and if they're queued up, they'll wait 15 minutes, fire. So you don't want to have a missile queued up to fire, blocking you from firing your tubes. You want to, but that's if you want to be more careful about it. Ever since I dropped doing that for just doing the send 1 R3N trick, it's worked out fine. You gotta remember, an R3N flies in 10 minutes, like from target to target, like 2,000 kilometers an hour over 2,000 kilometers. I mean, yeah, there's an acceleration period, but it's not very long with an R3N, so it's less than 15 minutes to hit the target anyway. So pretty much, yeah, right. Like the second one, you won't even really fire, but there could be an R3N in the air before you head cap them. So yeah, whatever. Anyways, that's logic. If you have to fight 2 of them at once, you want to probably headshot both of them. Like, you want to incapacitate both of them, then completely cleanse the city they're in, basically. Alright, that's the six. Anyways, this is a Gen 3 concept, the black hole. So the black hole is a name, whatever, for a design. I made a video on it. I honestly couldn't recommend watching that video, because it takes forever to watch it, and my recording software completely shit the bed when I was recording it. But it's funny as shit, and you barely can tell what's going on, because my recording software took a shit. So we were goofing around with a very long stick of thrusters, spinning it around, and then we learned a really weird trick. So, this is actually nothing to do with strategic combat. It's a problem with the AI in tactical combat. So, there is a bit of an issue with AI in tactical combat. So, when you're spawning in, the AI usually first spawns you, then immediately afterwards, it spawns all the enemies around you. Now, you've probably noticed, because you've played the game, that the game's not broken, and AI don't spawn on top of you. There are checks in the game to make sure that the AI and you don't spawn inside each other, right? And same to some degree for the enemy, right? Okay, that's where it gets broken. So, you may have noticed that none of these enemies have spawned above my Varyag, right? I'm gonna call it the Varyag, but I'm referring to my Varyag. Obviously, it's weird to say that, but no. This is because one of the first rules of AI logic spawning is that they can't spawn directly above or below you, or not directly. They can't spawn very close to you above and below you. You can't spawn directly in. To this, it refers the entire ship's hitbox. So, that's the first rule, right? That's the biggest rule for some reason. The next rule is, obviously, you can't spawn things inside each other. Of course, one of these went before the other, for some reason. And, so an issue arises. They'll usually try and spawn at the top of the screen, but sometimes at the bottom, usually at the top. So, a problem arises in that if your ship is wide enough, the enemies will actually... Here's the thing. The enemies will be told basically that the entire screen's off limits to spawn on. And the AI just goes, what the fuck? Like, right? Like, it's being told, I have nowhere to spawn. So it's like, no, not doing that. And, fair, this is all theory. I don't know the code, but this is pretty much the effect. And what will happen is, if you make a stick, this is a 3-kilometer wide ship. This does what I intend. You make a very wide ship, the enemies will have nowhere horizontally to spawn. What will happen is they will all default to spawning in the corner of the map farthest from you. There's a problem with this in that this is prioritized over the line of code for spawning enemies inside each other. That was probably the best demonstration possible for what happens. This can backfire, but we call this I call this black hole strat, or we call this, because, 4 of us were in a call shitting the bricks when this happened. It is a black hole generator is the name of the kind of ship we call for this. It is basically just a stick that is so wide the AI spazzes out when spawning and all spawns in each other. The caveat is you need at least one enemy, at least 2 or more enemies, because you need them to actually collide with each other. Otherwise they just spawn there and they, whatever. Another caveat is that this is not a very reliable entirely strat. Sometimes it will bug out, and you will actually die instead for some reason. I don't know what it is. Could be your enemy. There you go. Happened. Good example as well. Perfectly. On time. And this is actually more common. See, defeat, lost the ship. And what's even worse is sometimes you'll get a victory condition like this, where it blacks out, but it actually did kill all the enemies, and whatever. This means that this strategy isn't perfect, and it's not reliable. unlike R3Ns, which is why I won't go and say it can just win. But the big thing is, if you throw one of these in, remember, this is just a 3 kilometer wide stick of ship. This is actually a pretty light ship. It's 12,000 tons in all, but that's also because I put a lot of vertical strut on it and thrusts. You can always probably get away with something smaller, right? If I do this, it drops down to 7.7 thousand tons. Okay, it's not the greatest, but anyways, point being, and that's with some speed to it. You could always make it slower and only go 90, right? And that would probably save you a bunch of weight as well, because these weigh like fucking 1,000 tons for 2 of them, I think. Whatever. Anyways, maybe it's 3. I don't remember what ship weight. Anyways, the point is, this is basically probably the quickest way to deal with a large number of ships. This is faster than nukes. When it works. It does not always work. Like I just said. And it will actually not work a majority of the time. You will actually have a problem where you have to wait out your morale gain. Because you'll need to have 10 morale for all the restarts you do. Otherwise you're screwed. But anyways, point is, the big thing you gotta worry about in this kind of design is you're going to have to spend a lot of fuel to lug one along, and it's not even guaranteed to work. Remember, you can always put, like, because of AI logic, you can put these, like, right next to a city a Typhoon's going to go to, if you could actually make 10 of them and throw it at them. You could even use it to nuke Typhoons, but you'd realistically only want to use it to nuke the strike groups out. I'd say nuke, because that's how fucking effective these are, not because you use nukes. This is a very promising concept for the for a 3rd gen. Also, so... No, actually, it's not. That's no note. No, actually, yeah. One note is that sometimes the last ship to get collided with lives, especially when there's less ships. There's not enough particles of the ships that were destroyed before to actually kill them. Yeah. I'm trailing off. Point is, it's not guaranteed that you can employ this in speedrunning. Also, you can use it to nuke garrisons. You can use this to destroy garrisons going into Khiva. Not at Khiva, but before Khiva. That's one of the main possible uses of it. Yeah, it's going to be something that's going to be difficult. The big thing is it's really cheap. The hard thing is that it takes a lot of fuel relative to get it a long distance. Right? 373 per 1,000. That's pretty much all of my Fireflies put together. That's all of my Fireflies put together times 2. That's my main ship. This is a big amount of fuel you got to spend getting this around. So... it shows a ton of promise, but it's really going to be tricky to implement. That's one of the interesting things about the Highfleet speedrun, is because there's so much room in concepts that could work. And they really can work. They actually can. It just... I haven't figured them out yet, right? That's why I love this game for speedrunning, is because you actually can theorycraft min-max for a while. There's some life in this. Anyways, that's that. I have restarted this topic 4 times now, thinking I forgot something, and I think I covered everything. So, when you're starting a game, small exploit, really not regular exploit, just quickest way through this. When you get to the start of the game, escape, space, escape. Just keep that in mind, right? Move your middle finger or index finger to escape, thumb to space. Just hit that. Really simple. That's just a quick way through that. You skip all that shit in like 2 seconds flat. Simple. That's really not a big exploit or something hard to grasp, but I'm dwelling on. And next up is a minor game logic that's really strange, but it's something that's very easy to overlook, but it's there, and you have to use it a lot in speedrunning. It's one of the other things that makes it harder to speedrun than you think initially, is that because you're doing everything completely zoomed out. What I mean by this is tactic in strategic speed, right? Watch the clock. Passes faster the more you're zoomed out. Not even joking. That's just a thing. See? And when you hold shift, this applies as well. Simple thing to grasp. This means when you're holding shift, when you're moving in Strat, you're zoomed out. As many movements as possible should be done while moving, holding shift, zoomed out under Strat, which means you're doing all this completely zoomed out. You can get the hang of it pretty quickly, but keep it all in mind, right? You want to be exploiting the fact that the game is fast when you're zoomed out, because there's a big speed difference in that, actually. It's roughly 2 times, I'd say. Next up is the idea that Sevastopol... the idea of Sevastopol's value. In fact, you know what? I'm going to load back out to... So, what do I mean by Sevastopol's value? Why is this important? Okay, so when you start speedrunning, you're always going to take Sevastopol with you. She's the forced flagship. I forget if Varyag counts. Technically, Typhoon's a flagship, but you have to file edit to get her to be usable, so we're gonna say she's not allowed. Okay, right, simple, makes sense. No out piloting, got it. Sevastopol's value. You gotta remember, right? Sevastopol's a trove of value. She's worth 180,000 gold, and a lot of this can be stripped quickly. If you just pop the Squall off, that's 24k right there. That's a lot of fuel money you can use. The amount of fuel money you usually need at a campaign doesn't really exceed 100,000, but it can actually vary from like 70 to 110,000 gold worth. I'd say it depends how you where you buy the fuel, how much you buy, whatever, right? Because it's half off at stations. But the actual intrinsic fact is because fuel gain rate, I'll go over this in a second, is limited. You can't actually really use more fuel than a certain amount before you start just getting nuked by strike groups in early game, or just attacked in general, which costs time. So when you're stripping Sevastopol in early game, you have to remember that the guns carry the most value, followed by the ammunition, and then sensors are kind of in a leeway. The big idea is you're actually trading how much time it takes to obtain the value, right? The longer you spend stripping, the less expensive modules you have left. After a certain point, you just have hull and armor left, right? And stripping armor takes more time, more to finesse in that screen than it does to take ammo racks and squalls out. But of course, you might need more fuel. That is one of the things where the amount of fuel used, it can actually cost you time, depending on the build. So, anyways, let me break this down real quick. All right, so. Stripped like so, you have about 110,000 missing from Sevastopol. I've removed the guns, sensors, and ammo racks. You can definitely extract a decent amount out of the armor. I would definitely just start pulling large armor pieces if you need more fuel than 110k. But this is about the limit I'd say you should go to. After now, you're starting to spend a lot more time. You've already spent about a minute. So a bit of a breakdown is that ammunition will take you about 13,500 gold. Main guns will give you about 520,000 gold, 38,000 gold before the Squall. We're including nukes with this. And sensors will get you about 34,000 gold. So in order, guns and then sensors and then ammunition racks will take you. And you'll notice that this is almost sorted in how quickly you can assemble them. The guns are very easily to quickly grab. You probably know where they are easily. Sensors are more small and finicky. And then ammunition is just a lot of them to grab. Which is interesting, and especially because you can technically grab the first 34,000 out of this gold, which is like a whole third of it with literally 2 clicks, with just getting the massive radar and the Squall off, and then you can even add another 18,000 very quickly by stripping out the Sarmats. So when stripping the Squall, when stripping the Sevastopol, you actually have this little bit of an interesting exponential decrease over time as you strip. You can quickly grab the most expensive modules and tear them off the ship, and you can quickly grab a lot of cash. But the more cash you want, the longer it takes almost exponentially, right? If we started running out of armor, we have to start either taking up the engines or Zeniths? Not you start running out of modules that are even worth any real amount of gold at that point. Per click, it's the engines, and you're already below 1,000 gold for pretty much all these parts, I think. I mean, actually, wait, no, not even fuel tanks. Large hull? No, it's just engines, I think, that are over 1,000 here. Sprints are 300, right? I mean, of course, you can click a base piece that might be holding onto 2 things, and you might get close, but. Or you could tear off a part of the ship so that a bunch of parts drop. But then you also have to remember, you have to spam right-click afterwards to drain the money. By the way, you also want to make sure you remove these parts in a certain order so that you don't, if you want to keep anything here, you don't sell it as well and have to go over and find it real quick. That's another interesting consideration, is that your backbone ship, the biggest ship in your fleet, and pretty much your only ships with a Gen 1 speedrun, but this exists in all of them, it's going to want an Elint as you go towards Khiva, and you'll want to switch to an FCR at Khiva, which means you're probably going to want to keep a large Elint in FCR. Remember, if you don't buy this large Elint, if it's not on the design in the first place, that's 4,000 more gold you can put into other things. You can get a whole extra nuke. So instead, just use this Elint that you already have provided by good old Sevastopol. I love Sevastopol, even when we're horribly maiming her, sawing her in half, and throwing her into the desert, she's still got our best interests of us in mind on our trip to Warcrines. I fucking love you. But yeah.
basically you have to do a little bit of thing. If you ask me, you should at least be stripping the guns and sensors probably, and the ammo racks are where it gets considering, right? Because you're only getting like, you know, not even 15,000 gold out of them. That's where you start to consider it. And then armor is where I'm starting to question what the hell your fleet composition is that you need that much gold. Remember, you also need liquid assets to buy, you know, your bombs and rockets for your planes. And by the way, another note, when striking, when buying aircraft ordnance, you want to get bombs. Bombs have an immense alpha strike. They do way more than rockets overall. They're just much better in a speedrun scenario than rockets are. And just in general, I think they're better, but especially in a speedrun scenario, bombs are better. In fact, the reason why I spent a lot of time re-rolling speedruns was just trying to get bombs at I'm not even joking. Just getting bombs at was such a big deal in the early runs. Now that I'm starting to realize, honestly, that a third gen speedrun could actually probably completely do away with aircraft with intelligent uses of R3s, I think it actually, yeah, I think you might be able to just not do anything like that. And that may make it re-rollable, but whatever. One other notable consideration is when you are starting an Alright, so you only have so much time at to grab fuel before a strike group will arrive and start shooting missiles at you. And yes, you might be able to nuke them, fight them off. It'll just take time you don't have. It's more worth it just to basically build your fleet so they don't use so much fuel that you spend a long time in Really simple. I would roughly... Now, the interesting thing is this is a unit time, but the rate at which your ships refuel in strategic is actually like fixed. It is more ships doesn't make it faster, more fuel capacity doesn't make it faster or slower or anything. So you get a fixed amount of units per hour. Amount of tons can be transferred to an entire fleet as a whole. So what we can basically do is you can time this with basically how much fuel you bring. Really simple. I mean, that's you were expecting it to go, to be honest. I would roughly say you really don't want to go past 34,000 tons. That's you have about, I'd say, a 5% chance of reaching 34,000 tons of fuel before you're engaged. More realistically, I'd say a safe amount, or amount I'd aim for, is roughly 28 to 30,000. Roughly after 30 to 32,000, maybe 34. That's like when you really start seeing the first strike group show up. It can rarely show up very early or extremely late. And I guess you could make a super heavy fleet and basically restart 50 times to get there. Do remember though, you have to assemble the Sevastopol like before this all. So like you're spending a minute plus of effort. It's not really worth like spending a lot of time rerunning, right? But that could be a thing. To squeeze a bit of time or, you know, design out. Regardless, try and keep your fleet design below 30-ish thousand or so. That's what I'd say. In total fuel for the first jaunt. It'll obviously be less if you're using Gen 2.5 strats with boosters type ships. Did the music stop? Alright, so there's one more exploit I want to go over. Now, I'm the only speedrunner, and I have admin over on the speedrun.com board because I'm the only speedrunner, you know, whatever. I'm gonna honestly label this one as an illegitimate strat. There's a lot of leeway actually with the rule set, but this one, you'd be optimizing for like 20 seconds, and it would literally take days, literally, to set up runs. So just, I don't want to start with that, right? Also, it would be indistinguishable from speed splicing, so I really just don't want to deal with it. I don't want to make us all like wait days to set our games up to do that. That's just boring, okay? Anyways, so there's a bug in the game with, I'm guessing it's integer overflow or floating point error. I don't know. No, sorry, not integer flow, it's floating point error. I think it's a floating point error, but I'm not sure. Now, what it is if you start a campaign, right, when you're in this screen, right, not this one, but this one, or I think when you're in the preloading tack screen or in tack, right? If you sit in them for multiple days, I'm not joking, multiple days, you need to leave the game running, do not turn it off. You need to literally leave it running for about, well, it starts becoming noticeable after about 2 days. It becomes
noticeable. Like, we're talking 2 times after about 4 days, maybe 5. I don't know why. Tactical combat speeds up. I'm not even joking. The game will actually speed up and start running at a higher speed. All the sounds and whatnot will actually still play at the same original speeds, but the physics engine will be run at an accelerated rate, and it seems to only increase the longer you leave it out. The most I think I've ever seen is 5 days, which roughly equates to about doubled speed, and it's absolutely fucking hilarious. I have some scarce footage on my drive from the one time I did it. I didn't really record much, and because obviously, you know, I had to use my computer for shit, and you know, having Highfleet running for everything was annoying. Somebody else in the Discord also took recording. This is a really just funny bug more than it is anything, but theoretically, if you really want to go make a like super exploit run or something stupid, I don't know. If we ever have a category for like people who just dump all their money, like start doing editing or like just try and break the game by like editing like illegal shit and stuff, I'll probably allow that. But if you want to, just for enjoyment, make it like a stupid speedrun, I guess you can shave a few seconds off with this one. It probably increases the speed of missile strikes and whatnot, but I really don't. If everybody wants it, sure. Alright? I'm game for it. I'm not the only person here, right? But right now I'm the only speedrunner, so my opinion, and because I'm the only speedrunner, my opinion, guess as fact, right? I mean, go ahead, speedrun. Don't even need to beat me to have an opinion. If 2 of you come up here and don't even beat me, and honestly, you can. I've told you a million times how to. That's kind of the point of this video, right? I'm showing you I'm confident a sub 20 is possible. Somebody else go ahead. But even if you don't beat me and 2 of you say you want it to be a thing, I'll cave and I'll let you. But I'm just saying, I'm still not going to agree with you. I think it's really fucking boring to leave your game running for like 6 days to do a speed run. I'm sorry. Like that. If anything, that sounds like a hardware lock to me. But yeah, okay, this is a funny glitch you can fuck around with your off time. Since I guess this video is a little bit about the exploits as well. Obviously, there's other exploits I haven't covered in this video. Obviously, keeping cards to my chest for content, but this is actually about 60% or maybe 70 or 80 of the exploits I know in this game, possibly.